What's going on, Colts Nation? I appreciate you joining me for another video where this one we're going to be talking a little bit about Chris Ballard, some of the comments he made, what it means for the team, trying to read through the tea leaves. Of course, Chris Ballard generally pretty good about saying a lot and not giving us anything, and that's really what he's good at. But he is also very transparent at the same time, right? Good little mix, and gives us as much as he can. So what we're looking at, and we're not going to watch his press conference here. Just going to go through the different positions and what he talked about with the different positions. So starting with the quarterbacks, and we'll talk about who we have on the team, right? He talked about how pretty much everything we've talked about, competition, how it's going to make everybody greater, and how, right, kind of referencing, he didn't specifically go out and say, Geno and blah, 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 Sam Darnold, all these different quarterbacks, but we've talked about it and everybody's aware of it, especially Colts fans. Like, this is a conversation of there are people that aren't great immediately, and this is what Ballard was talking about. People that come into the NFL, they fail off rip, but they just need time, especially somebody so young like Anthony Richardson, right? You give these players time to develop as men. You give them time to develop as players in the NFL and as quarterbacks and as leaders of a football team, right? And being able to develop all that. And of course, as fans, and even as front office, like if things don't work this year, then like whatever development Anthony Richardson goes through, like if it's not working this year, good chance Ballard and some of the other people in the front office aren't here anymore. And some of the people on the coaching staff aren't here anymore. Like that's a very real possibility for the Colts. So for Ballard and his staff, like as much as we all understand the development of Anthony Richardson, he could develop down the line. He has to succeed this year. And that's just the simple fact of it. But that's just what Ballard was talking about. I can't remember the exact question that he was asked, but essentially just talking about the competition in that quarterback room, how it needs to make somebody better. Also talking about how you can't go into it with a predetermined outcome because it needs to be an open competition. Somebody needs to win it. Somebody needs to step up and be the quarterback that this team needs. So that's a thought going into that. Now, talking about quarterbacks not on the team, right, and talking about quarterbacks in the draft, and there were different questions, and there was this was talked about kind of at length in that press conference about how, right, because the Colts did homework on a couple of these quarterbacks, especially Quinn Ewers. Right, we've talked about that. Also, the Louisville quarterback, and so there are different quarterbacks that the Colts have done their homework on. And there are even people thinking, hey, maybe Shedeur Sanders slides a little bit. Colts end up drafting him. And that's something that I've just seen like Colts fans and, some people in Colts media kind of mention. Nothing definitive there at all. Highly doubt that happens, to be completely honest. But there has been conversation about Colts going and getting another quarterback because of the ones they've looked into, and what Ballard was talking about was that no matter what, and we have seen this in years past about how they're going to continue to do their homework every year on some of the quarterbacks in the draft. And he kind of referenced what the Packers did, right? How even though they had the guy that they were riding with, right, these Hall of Fame quarterbacks, when they saw the right opportunity, right, after doing their homework through their draft process, they honed in on a guy that they wanted to be their next franchise quarterback, or thought this could be the guy that we could develop into the franchise quarterback. And that's what the Packers did, right? Get a couple of guys that sit a couple of years behind some Hall of Famers, and boom, really good quarterbacks. So that's kind of just what he was talking about, is, hey, we're going to do our homework. If we think that we can get a guy at some point and it makes sense at the time in the draft to take him, and it makes sense for us to take him, then that's what we're going to do, and we're going to see where that leads us in the future. And of course, that's the right way to be a GM. That's exactly what you should be doing. But it's just him talking about his process and what the front office is doing, kind of to be expected. I think, especially in our situation, ever since Andrew Luck retired, it's made sense to do homework on quarterbacks every year. And I think with the way things are right now, between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, I just think it's the right thing to do, to seriously contemplate going and getting a quarterback. Like, I think we've done 3 mock drafts. I think I've taken a quarterback in 2 of them. Maybe 3. I think just 2. But nonetheless, we have another mock draft going to be coming up. And I'm telling you, good chance there's a quarterback in that one, because I just think you continue to add competition. If it doesn't work this year, you draft a guy that you think, hey, this guy could have potential to be really good. And as the offseason continues and I've looked more into everything. Some of these quarterbacks that you can get in the later rounds, like we're talking like the success that Brock Purdy has had, like is one of these guys lands in the right situation and gets an actual starting opportunity at some point. I think some of the quarterbacks that are going to be found in the later rounds, the mid to later rounds, are actually going to end up being good NFL quarterbacks, right? But we're talking about guys that are going to have trajectories like Sam Darnold and like a Geno Smith, where it might take a little while coming in. But I do think that some of the quarterbacks in this draft, a lot of the quarterbacks in this draft possess a lot of the traits that you would want from a quarterback: physically, mentally, processing ability to hold, store, and recount information. It's just different things as I looked into these quarterbacks that I feel better about. And of course, the separator, one of the biggest separators, is the situation they come into. So we'll see what happens there. But of course, as we talk about the quarterback situation and possibly drafting one, Quinn Ewer is probably the one that's going to come up the most for the Colts. At least that's the one that, on the surface, that's the one it seems like the Colts are most into in this draft. I do think Will Howard is interesting, but I think his stock might be coming up a bit, so that one's probably going to be off the board. There are some other good ones. Who is the kid? Kyle McCord is impressive, honestly. Like somebody who's kind of sneaky in this draft. Somebody that I think everywhere he's gone throughout high school, college, like he wins. Even went to Syracuse, won a lot of games. So some really interesting quarterback options coming up. It'll be interesting to see what the Colts decide to do. But as we finally move on here to other positions, there was nothing about running backs. There was nothing about wide receivers. Of course, talking about tight ends. And he said exactly what you would want him to say, right? He talked about the importance of a guy that can play all 3 downs and be a threat in every way, where he's not going to step on the field and teams like, okay, we're running the ball, or he's going to step on the field and be like, okay, they're passing the ball. We need to find a guy that can come in and both block, and a guy that's going to be able to be a factor in the pass game and be somebody that the quarterback can trust, right? It's exactly what we've talked about. That's what Ballard's talking about, is trying to find that guy. And I know even as I believe it was this morning, maybe it was yesterday, I believe it was this morning, but either way, there was a report talking about, hey, some of these guys, making calls around the league. It was one of the insiders, hey, I'm making calls around the league. These are the guys that are going to go higher in the first round than people think that they will, and Colston Loveland was one of them. So very, very possible that the Colts get their tight end in the first round. People are going to talk about, oh, he can't block. Better blocker than I think people give him credit for. He is a big dude, and he can move people. Of course, he's going to need to get stronger in the NFL. He'll do that as he continues to develop into his more manly form, and as he gets around strength coaches in the NFL. So that's where we go. I'm going to be okay with it if we somehow get Tyler Warren. Like he even said, like it doesn't matter if we're picking at 14, pick 14, pick 10, pick 25. We're going to do what's best for the Colts. So he even referenced like, hey, like there is actual possibility. Like if it's in his head and he's saying it publicly, like, hey, he might, have a thought, hey, we're going to go up a little bit and get Tyler Warren if he's there, or stay at 14, get Colston Loveland, or fall back a little bit until later first round, get extra draft picks and still get Mason Taylor, turn Mason Taylor into a first round pick instead of an early second round pick. So there are options for the Colts. I think they're going to be options throughout the draft. Of course, at the tight end position, one of those, and the running back position, a couple of those that are pretty deep and are going to find value in those mid to late rounds. Which, another thing Ballard talked about when asked about the draft just as a whole, and asked about the depth that he sees in it, and mentioned what everybody knows, like the high end talent isn't as much this year as it has been in years past, especially in the recent past. A lot of high-end talent coming out of college recently, but this particular year, there's some really good high-end talent, but then there becomes quite a gap. So like rounds 2 to 5 are the ones that are going to be packed with a lot of depth, a lot of solid NFL players coming in rounds 2 to 5, right? Guys that are going to be staples for teams that are going to make pretty good money, especially with what players are making nowadays. You're right, still going to be able to make good money in their career, but are going to be difference makers at different spots. And again, guys that are drafted in the 2nd and 5th round, those are guys, hey, situation is situational. You got to be able to come in and figure it out right away and find a way to get on the field. But I think with the potential of this class, right, again, not as much high-end talent, but can be that 2 to 5 range, man. I think there could be a lot of players in that range that have developed right and put in the right situation and on the right team, going to be really good players, right? You get drafted, like just saying, you get drafted to the Ravens, like good chance you're going to be coached well enough to become a good NFL player and have a decent NFL career. Like good chance of that. So that's what I'm talking about. Situations are situational. Okay. But that was really it on the tight ends. Really just everything we've already mentioned is kind of what Ballard was talking about. Offensive and defensive line didn't really say a whole lot. He was asked about defensive tackle and the need for defensive tackle and how big that need is. And his answer wasn't directly about defensive tackle, but it was about offensive and defensive line where, hey, he basically said, you know how I feel about building the offensive and defensive line. So he's looking at both of them, trying to get depth at both of them. And of course, in this draft, there's plenty of defensive tackle depth. A lot of guys in the middle of the defense. Of course, not everybody's a 3 tech. So it's really, what do you want? And there's probably some need for a guy that can rush the passer from the middle. But overall, right now we have 5 defensive tackles on the roster. We no longer have Dio Dangbo, who has that inside flexibility. So without that, we're looking at 5 guys in the middle, and we need more. That's just a simple fact. We need more. So I assume in this draft, we're going to be getting it. And that's why he didn't want to answer that question directly. He doesn't want to directly say, yeah, this is what we're looking for, and sell a little bit of his hand, right? Show a little bit of his hand. But that's definitely something we need. Talking about linebackers, sounds like Jalen Carlies, never really know what to say there. They call him JC. I'm going to call him JC just so I know I'm not going to get it wrong. But it looks like he had a shoulder surgery that he actually played. Maybe it was just the last game of the season, but played at the end of the year with a shoulder injury that he went into the offseason, had to have shoulder surgery for, and he should be good to go by training camp. No worries there. And he really didn't go into depth on too much. He kind of talked about, linebackers that they had in the past that kind of came up. So he talked about some of the guys on the roster that they like Segan Alubi, and talked about, Zaire Franklin started as a special teamer and then came on as a linebacker. But that you would just assume linebacker is a position that the Colts are going to be looking at, just looking at the situation. Other teams know, looking at it, and that the Colts are going to be looking for defensive tackle and linebacker at some point. But it's just when do the Colts go fill that need? Who do they fill that need with? That's going to be the interesting question. And for the first time in a long time, I don't think there was any questions at all about the secondary to Chris Ballard. I might have to go back through and listen again. I listened to it twice. I don't think there was any questions about the secondary, which is great. We're not really looking at secondary. If we can hone in on somebody and get somebody for a great value in the secondary, that would be great. You know what? He did talk about the kicker situation, and kind of talked about what we talked about. Like it's more about Spencer Schrader than it is Matt Gay. Matt Gay, just like we talked about, like he He was really good with the Rams. Like, it just, whatever it just wasn't working out with us. And he had a little bit of a decline with us, but still capable of hitting field goals. Hopefully he lands in the right situation. But Spencer Schrader was just good. He was good in the preseason, and Ballard knew that they had something in him, but playing the game of who to put on the roster and who not to put on the roster. Spencer Schrader stays on the practice squad, gets picked up elsewhere, or on the roster, off the roster, on the roster, off the roster. From practice squad and then gone, and then ends up getting picked up by the Jets, and then ends up getting picked up by the Chiefs, and ultimately, just lucky that he ended up becoming a free agent again, right? Ending up with the Chiefs. You knew they had Harrison Butker. They weren't going to keep Spencer Schrader, and I was excited about that. And we were somehow able to get Spencer Schrader back. Signed a 2-year contract with us, and the writing was on the wall right then and there. We talked about it. I had a separate video about it here on this channel about that situation. And, the writing was on the wall. And ultimately, Spencer Schrader ends up with the job. This is a guy that he showed exactly what he's going to be able to do. He can hit from distance, like the power that he has, the accuracy that he has, both on field goals and on extra points. Didn't have a bunch throughout last year, right? Came in for Harrison Butker for a period and then not anymore, right? Wasn't with the Jets for very long, only played in 1 game with us, only kicked 3 extra points, no field goals. So not a whole lot of experience, but what you saw again in the preseason and in the regular season for all the different teams that he played for, I thought it was enough to say Schrader deserved the job over Matt Gay. Ends up being that the front office agrees that Spencer Schrader just did enough to be able to really come in and win that job away from Matt Gay. So going into the season, no questions there. They will bring in another leg or two in training camp just to continue to push competition. But Spencer Schrader, seemingly the guy for the future for the Colts, which is good. And that pretty much covers it. Again, talked a little bit about some different nuances in the draft. Of course, he's not going to give away draft strategy. I think we pretty much covered anything that needed to be talked about from that aspect. So with that said, let me know your thoughts on the press conference. Let me know your thoughts on what Ballard had to say. What do you think he's going to do in the upcoming draft? What do you think could happen? You let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Love to hear from you guys. And of course, if you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you continue to get notified anytime we drop any content on this channel. Of course, appreciate you stopping by for another video. As always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.